My name is Mr. Smothers. Thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to speak to you. Today, we are going to be speaking about the major principles of the United States Constitution. And this is a picture of the Constitutional Convention. I think you guys, a few weeks ago, you were talking about the Articles of Confederation and how they're really, really weak and how they didn't provide a strong government for the colonies and how there are such a things like they weren't able to tax well, they couldn't provide for a very good army. Not all the states wanted to come together and obey it. So everybody, a lot of the people during this time, they got together. Their major goal was to form a better form of government. And because the Articles of Confederation were really weak. Now, this was called the Constitutional Convention. It took place from May to September 1787 at Philadelphia in the Pennsylvania State House. They later named that place the Independence Hall because that was also the same place where they signed the Declaration of Independence. So it became a famous building, a famous landmark called Independence Hall. All these guys here, it was 55 delegates from all across the colonies, all 13 colonies. They came together, they came to debate, to hash, to kind of set up a plan that they could make a form of government. At first, they didn't think they were going to replace the Articles of Confederation. They just wanted to make it stronger. But when they were finally done, they made a completely new form of government, and it was called the Constitution of the United States. And it was part of the compromise between, you remember, the New Jersey Plan and the Virginia Plan. A lot of the revolutionary people that were prominent in the Revolutionary War, like George Washington or Ben Franklin, they were all here at the Constitutional Convention. That's a little bit of background information behind that. The Constitution was finished and drafted on September 17th, 1787. When was the Constitution was ratified, however, when was the Constitution ratified? On June 21st, 1788. It was ratified by 9 states, and this was the minimum amount needed for it to become binding and legal. A few months and maybe a couple of years afterward, it was ratified by all 13 states. But the minimum amount it needed was 9 states.
13 states at the time, it needed to be approved or ratified by 9.
And what was the Constitution? It was the document that set forth the government for all the 13 colonies for the whole United States. And what it does, it provides 5 basic principles of government. What are the 5 basic principles of government listed in the Constitution? Number 1, you have popular sovereignty. That's the idea of rule by the people. The second would be limited government. I guess Bernie likes the idea of popular sovereignty. Then you have separation of powers as number 3. The 4th principle would be checks and balances. Checks and balances. And the 5th one would be federalism, the idea of federalism. So those are the 5 basic principles of government that are set forth in the United States Constitution. Go away. That was at the first inauguration, the inaugural, no, State of the Union address. I remember that. They were clapping, but they were really.
The bottom one was a Republican primary debate, right?
Maybe Rand Paul or Ted Cruz or who
I
knows.
would guess Jeb Bush.
Jeb Bush?
Or Marco Rubio. Yeah, any of those.
Okay. So the first principle of government we'll talk about is the idea of popular sovereignty. This is the idea that means rule by the people, that the people have a say in their government. Now this, even the preamble begins with, "We the people of the United States," that we are setting our own government. See, we the people. And it was a radical idea at the time of the founders. Why is this? Because most of the countries were either a monarchy. Everybody knows what a monarchy is.
Yeah,
Ruled by king or ruled by the queen. Or you had oligarchies, which were just a few group of people that came together to provide for the executive and legislature, making laws, carrying out those laws, and running the courts. But this was ruled by all the people. It was set forth a democracy. One of the last times we had this, they got this idea from the Greeks and from the Romans because they were very big on democratic government. So popular sovereignty means rule by the people. Another idea of principle of government is the idea that there's limited government or the rule of law. The Constitution is the supreme law and authority of the United States. So what document is the supreme law? That would be the Constitution. It means that the government cannot violate the Constitution, which means anybody that works for the government or the Senate or the Congress or judges or even the president, if he wants to do something that the Constitution does not prescribe him to do, he can't do it. They may try, but it always gets struck down by the courts or something else. It also means that the government and organizations, they're not all powerful. They cannot do whatever they want. Like in other countries, the leader or a president or a dictator may say something, you have to do this, and you have to do it. You don't have any recourse. But our government leaders cannot do that. They are not all powerful. They are under the jurisdiction of the Constitution. They are subject to the laws just like the people, just like you and me. Just like you and me have to obey the laws of the land, so do our leaders. That is the idea of limited government. The third principle of government is the idea of separation of powers. Now, what does that mean? It means that all of government isn't put into one single body. We have the powers of the United States government has been separated into three distinct branches. The first branch, the government of the United States, is not all encompassed in one branch like a monarchy or a dictatorship. The first branch is the legislative branch, which they make the laws, they put together, and it's our Congress all comes together, and they decide what laws need to be made. That's the legislative branch. Then we have the executive branch. That would be the president and the cabinet and all the members of government that enforce the law. The attorney general, he would be over charge of all the police forces, the federal police forces, and everything like that. Then the third branch would be the judicial branch. That includes our court systems, the local courts, the state courts, the federal courts. These are all, and then it goes up to the Supreme Court. They are all under the judicial branch. And also, the fourth principle of our government includes the idea of checks and balances. What a check is, it means it keeps you from doing things that that are outside your power to do. So, like, let's say, well, there are three different and separate branches of government. Each branch can check another branch so it does not acquire too much power. Let's say the president in the White House, he wants to make a law. He just wants to make a law saying that no ice cream can be eaten on Sundays. Well, he doesn't have the power to do that. That would be a law that Congress would have to do. And that's how they keep within their spheres of power. Let's see how that works. Let's see legislation, like making laws. That's something Congress does. Now, legislation starts in Congress. They get bills and they pass laws. And then it can go to the executive branch, the president. He can veto the law. Veto is Latin for I forbid. So if Congress passed a law and the president vetoed it, that bill wouldn't come into law. However, if you have 2/3 of Congress that still want to vote that law and they vote it in again, they can override that veto because it takes a majority of Congress to pass a law. So they figure that if a majority, at least 2/3, that is good enough for it to be law because it has very popular support. And once a law is passed, it can go to the judicial branch. Like somebody doesn't like this law, they think it's unconstitutional. The judicial branch, the Supreme Court, can declare it unconstitutional. That's happened quite a bit in our history. Here's another way. We have this judge here. He could be of the Supreme Court. Let's say the judge does something that's really unpopular and people don't. I think judges can be impeached, right?
Correct. Yep.
They can be impeached. But how that works is how somebody becomes a judge is first, the president chooses the nominee. So it's somebody that the president would choose or whoever's in power, they would choose the judge. And then the Senate chooses whether to confirm the nominee or not. If the president really likes him, but he's an unpopular judge, and people in the Senate, the House of not the House of Representatives, but the Senate don't like him, they can choose not to confirm him. I think that happened. That kind of happened with President Obama on when it was an election year. He chose Merrick Garland to be a Supreme Court justice. Okay, but people thought since it's election year, maybe, and we're going to have a different president, maybe President Obama shouldn't do that. So they did. When the Republicans controlled the Senate, they wouldn't even bring it forward to confirm him. So he wasn't able to be confirmed. Even though the president chose him to be the Supreme Court justice, they wouldn't even hear it because it was election year. And that's how they put checks and balances on each other. So that is what is the process of one branch being able to challenge another called. And the fifth principle of government, you don't have to write that all down. Definition of federalism is just a system of government in which power is divided between the central government and the state government. That's all you need up at the first paragraph. You just got to realize that federalism it's a system of government where power, we have a federal government that's over all the states, and then we have the individual states which have their power, and that sharing among the power among each other is called federalism. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution lists or enumerates the power of Congress. Okay? And then the 10th Amendment of the Constitution declares that all powers not previously enumerated or listed in the Constitution is reserved to the individual states. So,
I'm going to jump in here just real quick. Federalism is super, super cool because it oftentimes gets overlooked because think today our national government does or is seen by like you guys or even people my age as like all powerful or having all the power or controlling the states. But the idea of federalism, the idea that you have a national government, a state government, and a local government, and they share powers and responsibilities, that's a really cool and really powerful message. And like what Mr. Smothers said back when this started, people were shocked by this. Okay, this was a new idea, right? Um, the movie that we watched, The More Perfect Union, talked about how Ben Franklin said, I don't know if this concept is going to work, but I'm willing to give it a try." Okay, that's kind of what we're talking about here, where you have a central government, you have state governments, you have local governments, and each one is sharing power and responsibilities. That's a really, really powerful thing.
Okay. Now, how that works is, let's say we have state powers. Power is only delegated to the state, and then federal powers. Okay. Now, what would you think a state power would be? One power that was reserved to the state would be schools. The state provides money and takes care of its own schools. Another thing would be marriage laws or kind of different laws concerning marriage and other aspects of society. It's up to the state to regulate that inside its own borders. And then we have state licenses like driver's license. Like I couldn't get a California driver's license here in Wisconsin, and vice versa. Or I couldn't get I couldn't get an Illinois deer hunting license here in Wisconsin either, could I? Okay. They regulate
Unless
their
you do
own
it online.
license unless I do it online.
Mr.
But it'd be
Smothers,
only good for Illinois. It wouldn't be for Wisconsin.
if you're married in Wisconsin and you go to California, are you still married?
Yes, because I guess that's a good question because the federal protect is that under the equal protection, or I think it's under the equal protection of the Constitution.
That they
That's a good question. I didn't think about that.
that they recognize. the
However,
rights.
it used to be like if you were married, like some of the new types of marriages, if you were married in one state, you weren't legally recognized in another state. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
But that they recognize the rights and the idea that citizenship extends to your right extends to other states
Right.
in the Constitution itself.
But even a state law, somebody could take a state law to court, to the Supreme Court, and that's what happened with some marriage laws lately. Is some marriage laws of different states were ruled unconstitutional. Therefore, all the states, it became a federal issue. Therefore, all the states had to allow those types of marriages. Okay, and then under federal powers, what would federal powers be? Declare war. Now, obviously, the state of Wisconsin can't declare war against Canada or a different country, or declare war against Illinois or stuff like that. That is solely a power reserved to the federal government. Then print money. Only the federal government can print money. Wisconsin can't print money. And foreign policy, that has to do with treaties and sending our ambassadors over to certain places. They represent the whole United States. They don't represent just individual states. Now there are powers that state and federal kind of have together. One of those would be taxes. We pay taxes to the state of Wisconsin, and we pay taxes to the federal government. We have income taxes to do that. Also, roads and public works. I think out here, 17, that is a state road. The state of Wisconsin takes care of that. But if you go down to 39, Interstate 39, I think it's 70 a state road, or is
State.
70 is a state road. But the interstates, they are taken care of by the federal government.
Highway 2 up in Watersmeet. Okay, you can go all the way, you can go past North Dakota all the way west, and then it also goes through, obviously it goes through the UP, it goes through Minnesota, it goes through Wisconsin, it goes through the Dakotas, It extends all the way even to like Sault Ste. Marie area, the Mackinac Islands, that area.
And public works like state parks, federal parks, national parks. They're in the middle of a national forest,
Yes.
and there are state forests too. Established courts, there are state courts, there are federal courts. The Supreme Court is a federal court. In the courthouse in Eagle River, that is the Vilas County Court. So that is a county court though.
Correct.
I think a state court, would the state court be in Madison, and then one of the federal courts is be in Milwaukee?
So the state would break it down into county courts, but if there was an issue, then they would go to Madison, to the either the state court of appeals or the state Supreme Court.
Right. And they regulate commerce. Like the state of Wisconsin would regulate commerce. Everybody know what commerce is? It's buying and selling, and taxes along with that. That's what commerce is. The state of Wisconsin can only regulate commerce inside of Wisconsin. It can't regulate commerce for Michigan. But federal powers, they have what is called interstate commerce, and they regulate commerce for the whole country. So that is that.